Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome along to the programme. This is the history programme with the Limerick Historical Society. You're all very welcome along. Just again, if you want to link into us, you can go to Lir Media and you'll find us, I suppose, and you'll find us obviously on YouTube as well, if you want to go. Or you can go to my face page, Tony Browne, and you'll find this. We're here. We'd like you to subscribe as well. And you'll see on your screen, you'll see a subscribe button down in the corner. Just click on that and it gives up our numbers. We'll know how many are watching or listening. Tonight, as usual, again, I have Tom Donovan with me. Hello, Tom. You're welcome along.
Good evening, Tony.
And also tonight, we have a guest. Again, we're getting very fond of these guests now. And we have Tom Toomey with us. Tom, you're welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Anthony.
Oh, lovely. Tom, tonight we're going a different subject again, because last week we had Mr. and Mrs. Norman Ivers on, Cameron and Norma, talking about 6 Mile Bridge, or really Mount Ivers house and the Ivers family. And we dabbled a bit on St. Valentine, whether he existed or whether he didn't exist. I met one person during the week who called me an atheist, though, not recognising poor St. Valentine. But anyway, we'll leave that go by the wayside. Tom, first of all, I should tell people out there, your main interest, along with your general interest in history, is really in the War of Independence. First of all, on Limerick especially, and you've written a tome. Where's that book? Have you that book near you there? You can show it in a few minutes. The front book. You'll find it in a few minutes. You can reach out and get it with myself and Tom Donovan are waffling away. Anyway, first of all, Tom, why is your interest in the War of Independence?
When I was young, for about, I suppose, 10 years of age, there was a film came out, Shake Hands with the Devil. It featured James Cagney. And it really frightened the life out of me. It was based on the War of Independence in Dublin. And you might say it made an impression. Now, the second thing that happened was I started asking my father questions about the War of Independence. And unlike most fathers, he actually answered them. So it's fueled itself. I got more and more interested. Now, around the same time, that was about 1959, 1960, right? 1961, we were living down in a place called Cappoquin in County Waterford. And the 1961 election, Dan Breen, it was the last election that Dan Breen stood in. And my father knew Dan Breen. They were from the same part of the prairie. And I was actually introduced to Dan Breen. So that kind of fueled an interest.
Yeah. So
with a very good primary teacher.
Sorry? Who was a primary teacher?
In Cappoquin.
But you had a good primary teacher. Sorry, yeah. Tell me this now. First of all, I should say, show my ignorance here. I constantly, for years and years, got confused between the War of Independence and the Civil War.
Yeah.
I kind of classed them as one. It was a man put me right in and said to me, actually it was Des Long that said to me, you're mixing up your War of Independence with the Civil War.
Yeah.
And it's good to ask Tom Donovan, did you ever get confused with those?
No.
Yeah, in the early days, I had a counsellor come to me there last year saying that the Black and Tans shot a woman in Glynn, despite the fact it was during the Civil War. And so it's not just you, Tony. People mix up, like the Black and Tans were long gone by the time the Civil War was there. So it's the same, it's around the same time period. It's late 1900s, early 1920s. And so you can understand, like, sometimes you have to stop and think, was this the War of Independence? If you see a date. But after a while, you get used to it, And I'd say by the time the end of all the commemorations, we'll all know, what we can talk about and what we can't talk about.
There's about a month of an overlap. There were still RIC in the country up to the end of July 1922. And the Civil War had started at the end of June 1922.
Yeah. I know there's no, but when you go into late 22 and 23 and people talk about the Black and Tans,
So first of all, 1916, what had you? What was the beginning?
Easter Rebellion.
At Easter Sunday, Easter Monday.
Easter Monday.
Yeah, Easter Monday, right?
Right.
What had we there first?
You had the Irish Volunteers.
Yeah.
Rose out against what they saw as British.
Sorry, Tom, Toomey, sorry. I think you should go back maybe a little and just explain about the split in the volunteers first.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, sir.
You really go back to the Home Rule Act of 1912.
Yeah.
The UVF, the Ulster Volunteers, the Unionists, rebelled against the passing of the Home Rule Bill. And they imported 30,000 rifles into Larne and Carrickfergus in April 1914. It was very significant that for that weekend, the RIC didn't go near either Larne or Carrickfergus. 3 months later, in July 1914, the Irish Volunteers, no, they weren't split at that stage, imported 900 rifles into Howth and 600 rifles into Kilcool in County Wicklow. And in Howth, the RIC were very active in trying to seize the rifles. The rifles came in Kilcool at night, so they weren't there. That was 1914. Then, in September 1914, John Redmond committed the Irish Volunteers, without reference to anyone else, committed the Irish Volunteers to supporting the British war effort. And that caused a split in the volunteers. 90% of the volunteers went with Redmond. 10%, dare I say it, followed the IRB diktat and went against that. And it's the people that went against Redmond that really formed the nucleus of the Easter Rising in Dublin in 1916.
Yeah.
So we're up to 16 then. This is during the war, the First World War, 14 to 18 war.
Yes.
Right? What happened then when they were defeated, as we all know, the week after Easter? What happened then? What happened to that group?
What happened then was very simple. The English, as always, sent over a stupid general. And of course, he started executing left and right.
Who?
Maxwell.
John Maxwell.
Yeah.
General John Maxwell.
Yeah.
John Grenfell Maxwell, right? I suppose Grenfell Towers is probably called after him. Anyhow, he executed 14 or 15 of the leaders, and it drove. The country had been totally against the rebellion. In fact, when they were taking some of the volunteers to the ships to deport them to England, they had to be protected from the Dublin mob by the British soldiers. But by the time Maxwell was finished, the whole sympathy of the country went with the volunteers. He executed, as I say, about 14, 15 of them. Some of them were non-entities, like Sean Houston, who had a Limerick connection. He wasn't very high up in the things. He was executed. Con Colbert wasn't extremely high. He was executed. Willie Pearce was executed because he was Padraig Pearce's brother. So it turned the country totally against Britain.
So they lasted then, this group that survived then, they lasted to now, we suggested to 1918, 1919.
Yeah.
So what happened then in 1919 or up to 1920?
Well, it was building the whole time. There was actually a clash down near Castle Island in Kerry. 2 volunteers were killed, clashed with the RIC. But in January 1919, 21st of January 1919, a group of volunteers under Sean Tracy and Dan Breen ambushed a consignment of gelignite going to Salahead Quarry, and 2 policemen were killed. And that's looked upon as being the starting point.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Tom? Tom
Yeah.
As regards Salahhead. You've been, Tom, we met in Salahhead before. We all know what happened down there and about what happened at Salahhead. There's been...
Well, if you look, I mean, it's looked at the start of the war, like, and Tom mentioned there, Kerry people claimed that there was incidents before that, but Tom is right, that's what's seen as the start of it. But I mean, the two policemen that were shot were just escorting Jellignite. They weren't,
Were they going to shoot anyone or anything?
Oh no, but look, that's warfare. That happens, and and that set off a train of events. Then, the War of Independence. But Tom is right. The martyrdom of the leaders was what created the Sinn Féin movement, and the whole anti-British feeling grew from that. You had the story of Pierce being shot in his wheelchair, his armchair, or being executed even with his wounds, and then Count Plunkett marrying Grace Gifford the night before, and being executed next day after he'd been married. All these kind of propaganda around it, and Maxwell was a very foolish general,
Stupid would be more the word, Tom.
Pardon?
Stupid would be more the word.
Yeah.
Tom, tell me this: when Dan Breen at Salahhead, right, with John Tracy, what happened then? How did they get involved as such? What happened with them? Were they in contact with other people? They obviously were.
Well, Tracy was pushing the whole time. Tracy was the driving force. There'd be no illusion about that. And now, Tracy, I'm not saying he necessarily went to shoot the policeman that morning, but if they didn't surrender, he certainly wasn't going to refrain from opening fire. And it does appear the two policemen got such a shock when they were told hands up that they didn't actually put their hands up. They scrabbled for their rifles. I mean, in fairness, they were in shock. The last thing they expected. And Tracy and a fellow called Ty Crow opened fire. Now, there's a myth out there that Dan Breen's hands are covered with blood that he shot. He didn't. Breen's gun jammed. The people who say whose shots killed the two policemen were Sean Tracy and Ty Crow.
Yeah. So where did they go then? I'm intrigued to know what did they do when they were finished, in other words?
They went on the run. Tracy Breen, Sean Hogan and Seamus Robinson went on the run.
Well, where does Sean Hogan come into there now with Dan Breen?
He took part in the ambush. Now, he was very young. He was only 17.
Yeah.
There I said, Tracy, Breen and Hogan had one thing in common. All their fathers were dead. So they were really kind of answerable to no one. You understand what I'm saying? Like, if your father was at home, you're a 25-year-old, he'd be asking you questions, what were you doing? Where are you? Yeah. Whereas these three boys, their fathers were dead. And let's be straight, they were really, they reputed the men of the house.
Breadwinners,
yeah. So,
go
on, sorry, Tom Donovan, what?
Yeah, I mean, that whole, that then went on to what we were talking about there recently, Tony, the rescue of Sean Hogan, and that, which is another story. But I suppose the War of Independence evolved. It came along, but it wouldn't have survived without 1916 because it had the sympathy of the people. And as Mao Zedong said, the fish, rebels need the people, like the fish need the sea. That they wouldn't survive. There'd be traitors, people who would give them up to the authorities. But they had sympathy, so they had safe houses. And that came into play when Sean Hogan was rescued.
Yeah.
But Tom, you've written, I should say again to people, you've written the book on the War of Independence in Limerick, right?
Yeah.
But you must have had to dabble. Limerick is placed where it's placed up in the corner of a rectangle. You must have dabbled into Tipperary and into South Clare and into North Cork and that.
Yeah, you see, You can't. War doesn't stop at a boundary, especially a guerrilla war. Like if you look in East Tipperary, West Tipperary, East Limerick, right? Now I would put it to you this way: the further west you go in Limerick, the quieter things got. The further east you went in Tipperary, the quieter things got. That there was a corridor about 10 miles east and west of the Limerick Tipperary border, extremely violent, extremely active. Tracy and Breen came from that area. Liam Lynch came from that area. Sean Moylan was a native of Kilmallock. Donncha Hannigan from Anglesborough. Denny Lacey from Anacarty. There was a whole plethora of men, dare I say it, coming from that area.
Yeah, you mentioned there's names then after spouting out that we've all heard of, Denny Lacey, Liam Lynch, that they've come in. So they were all kind of, in other words, they were all, what let's say, kind of members of a club together, weren't they? They would have been all members of Sinn Féin, would they?
It's not that easy to say. They were all in that area. Most of them were known to each other. Now, Liam Lynch was from Anglesborough, but he was operating around Fermoy in County Cork.
Yeah.
Sean Moylan was from Kilmallock, but he was operating around Newmarket in North Cork. Paddy Clancy from Cush near Kilfinnan. He was a creamery manager down in near at Allen's Bridge near Kanturk. So it's very difficult to pin it down. I'm just saying in that area there's a whole plethora of fellows.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So now another question. I'm curious about all these things. Where does the Black and Tans come into it? In what year?
Black and Tans came in. I'll tell you. Explain the Black and Tans. The RIC were under pressure. Morale in the RIC was bad. The pay in the RIC was very bad. They had been treated very badly for a long time by their leaders, and they were expected to do, dare I say, a dirty job. Now, an awful lot of Irish-born RIC members were resigning from the force. And at the start of 1920, the British realised that they weren't going to get enough men in Ireland to fill out the police numbers, right? So they started, there was a Major Fleming, Cyril Fleming from Fermoy, opened a recruiting office in London to recruit men from England into the RIC. Now, largely they were ex-soldiers, but not totally. Now, those men came over with, say, the first numbers, they came in March 1920, and they didn't have proper uniforms for them. So they had a mix and gathering of a uniform, khaki pants and a bottle green tunic. And some Limerick, he was a Limerick journalist, spotted a number of them getting off the train at Limerick Junction. And they reminded him of the Black and Tan hounds in Scarteen. So he termed them as Black and Tans, and the name stuck. Now, essentially, a Black and Tan was a man recruited in England. Now, there is a bit of a misconception that every Irishman was a Black and Tan. The recruitment to the RIC continued in Ireland, albeit they weren't getting the numbers they wanted, but they were still getting plenty of, quite a number of Irishmen joining up, because there was a tradition of joining the RIC in certain parts of the country. And you'd be surprised where those counties are. They're the counties on the west of Ireland: Galway, Kerry, Leitrim, Roscommon. Those counties.
But did Irishmen join the Black and Tans?
Yes, Irishmen joined the Black and Tans. If you define that Black and Tan as someone recruited in England, about 500 of the Black and Tans that were recruited were Irish-born who joined in England.
I thought they were the Scumbadeer from England. That's what I thought about now.
No. That's
No,
it.
we were taught going to school that they were out of jail and fellas who couldn't get. But the thing, Tom, you studied the recruitment in Kew, like
Yeah.
You spoke there about the recruitment drive and what Tony's talking about. Was there Irish people who were recruited, after March 1920, who would be classed as black and tans, even though, but recruited here in Ireland?
Yeah. Now, what I'm saying is there were 500 Irishmen joined the RIC who were recruited in England. I would class them as Irish-born black and tans.
Yeah.
At the same time, there were about 2,000 Irishmen joined the RIC in Ireland.
Yeah.
But they're not black and tans, they're just regular RIC recruits.
Yeah. God, I didn't realise that now.
So the benchmark is where they're recruited. If they're recruited in England, regardless of birth, they're black and tan. Yeah.
Yeah. Funny thing about it is there were nearly men from every country in the world in the black and tans. Now, there was about 10,000 black and tans all told. There was an amazing number of them from Aberdeen in Scotland. Nearly 400 out of 10,000. Now, in Wales, the Welsh was only just over 100 black and tans from Wales. You could use an expression as rare as a Welsh black and tan.
Yeah.
So there's more from Aberdeen than the whole of Wales.
There was nearly four times as many from Aberdeen as from all of Wales.
Why was Aberdeen targeted? What's the reason for that? Was Aberdeen?
I don't know. I suspect.
Was it?
I'd say unemployment, but I don't know for a fact.
I'd imagine. Yeah.
But they must have had a good recruiter up there, because you'd imagine areas like Glasgow and Liverpool would have high unemployment at that time as well.
It would, but there is a thing especially with Liverpool. There's a lot of Irish in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Glasgow would have the shipbuilding. They would have had employment now. Glasgow would.
Not after the war, Tony.
Yeah.
They would have had huge employment during the war. But you're talking about 1920.
So how long were the black and tans here? From when to when, roughly?
The first black and tan was actually hired. They hired 6 in the first week in January 1920. They were only a pilot group, right? Now, the last black and tan, believe it or not, was taken on after the treaty was signed. The last black and tan was a fellow called Albert Laws, and he was from Wiltshire. And he was taken on in December 1921. So really, that was about 2 years.
So then we're coming up. They were here then roughly anyway. 1920 they were here, we say.
Yeah.
Right. That's when most of I would call them atrocities were committed. Really, the things they did in the country. So we could talk all right now whether there were atrocities or there weren't, because we come to things like you were very much involved. We've had so many attacks on both one side and the other. There were atrocities committed in this country too. We know about by our own. But getting back to places like Drumkeen, for example, what happened in Drumkeen?
What happened in Drumkeen was they had reorganised the RIC in County Limerick. Now, in their wisdom or the lack of wisdom, they put 5 stations together under one district inspector. They had Pallasgreen, Cappamore, Doon, and Oola, right? And then they added Fedamore to it. Now, the other 4 are in a very compact area. There's only about 4 miles between them, right? But Fedamore is 15 miles away from Pallasgreen, right? And for some madness, they added Fedamore to this group. Now, the district inspector was based in Pallasgreen. He was a fellow called Adam Sanson. And the first Thursday in every month, Sanson would go to Fedamore with wages and to inspect the barracks, right? And the IRA picked up on that. A man called John Purcell from Carrick-on-Dish He was the IRA intelligence officer in Mid-Limerick. And he picked up on that fact. And he relayed it to his boss, Dick O'Connell. Dick O'Connell probably didn't have enough men to effect an ambush. So he got together with the OC of the East Limerick Flying Column, Donegal Hannigan. And they ended up ambushing the convoy. It was always two lorries of black and tans at Drumkeen on the return journey from Fedmore on the Thursday, the 3rd of February 1921.
But Tom, who would have planned that? Like, was it O'Hannigan or was there?
No. O'Hannigan, O'Connell. There were 6 people involved in the planning. It was planned at Davy Gearan's house in Ballyphillip near Kilkeely. There was, as far as I know, Davy Gearan, Donegal Hannigan, Liam Hayes, Jimmy Humphreys, Sean Carroll, and Dick O'Connell. Now, Carroll, O'Connell, and Humphreys were from Mid-Limerick, and the other 3 lads were from East Limerick.
And would they have a knowledge of the geography of the area?
They would. They
obviously did,
yeah.
And like, was it drawn up in paper or was it just a mental?
They walked the site.
Yeah.
They actually walked the site, and they were spotted, sussing out the site. And the man, John English, whose farm was nearly central to the ambush, he met O'Connell a couple of weeks later, or a couple of days later, and he said to him, is my place been sussed for an ambush? And of course, what could O'Connell do? Only denies. He said, if there was something going to happen, John, I'd know about it. There isn't. But so what could he do? He couldn't tell him, oh yeah, there is going to be an ambush. But they had been spotted, as I say, they had walked the site, and it was a brilliant ambush.
Yeah.
I mean, I notice if you talk about in terms of people died and fellas died, and and anyone's death is dare I say it, needless. But from the point of view of guerrilla warfare, they've never been given credit for the certainty of the ambush.
It's one of the biggest ambushes in Limerick, in Munster, is it?
It's the biggest ambush outside of Kilmichael. And it's only 2 weeks ago, Limerick County Council saw fit to put up a sign directing people to the ambush site.
You're joking. Was there never a sign there?
No. There's a memorial there for the last 12 years.
Yes.
The sign is only there. I think Nora Stokes and Pat O'Donovan got it erected. Now, there was a bit of a scramble, I think, to erect a sign. I mean, that should have been done years ago. You go down to Cork and Kerry.
Well, the
signs all over the place.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's true.
And let's be straight.
I never missed the sign now because I knew where it was and I know where the ambush was. I was there with Julie years ago. So I just took it for granted. There was a sign there. No,
there's no sign on the main road directing you to the ambush site.
Unfortunately.
There is now.
Yeah. Tell me this, Tom. These men that you mentioned, another thing that intrigues me, the likes again of Sean Moylan and of course all the names, did they work? What were they doing? What did they live off? Or was their whole, it must have taken a lot of time, all this planning and...
No, they were on the run. Once the thing really got going, those fellas were on the run, and they were living on their wits and whatever. But you mentioned the thing about they had the will of the people. They had the support of people, with the result that they go to houses and get fed. Now that came home to roost really in the Civil War, where houses that were open to the IRA during the War of Independence weren't open to them during the Civil War. So the Republicans were on, they were under pressure in the Civil War because it wasn't every house they could go to, whereas they were able to go to previously.
Yeah.
Another thing now, I mentioned a minute ago there, would these all have been members? What political party had we at the time during the War of Independence? What political party was there?
Sinn Féin.
That's all.
The Labour Party. No, the Labour Party was there as well, and the Irish Parliamentary Party. The Irish Party was dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Ever since Parnell went, the parliamentary party was split down the middle, and that's how Sinn Féin took advantage of after the Easter Rising. I mean, the whole country turned Sinn Féin after the Easter Rising.
16, yeah.
And the conscription crisis as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because I was at what's his name's grave, Willie Redmond.
Yeah.
He's buried. He's at a graveyard where he's buried. He's outside the wall. The rest of them are buried inside this graveyard, the rest of the soldiers. But his grave is separate. And if you drive around to see where he's buried, you can see this grave kind of in the middle of nowhere, outside the walls of a graveyard, with the Irish tricolour flying. And well, Willie Redmond, that's John Redmond's brother.
Yeah.
Because John, as you know, is buried down in there. I know where he's buried inside Wexford, you know. But anyway, but getting back again to the War of Independence, we're talking about now up to 1920 then, right? So what started this civil war? What from the War of Independence, where to me they were all palsy-walsy and fighting against England, right? Up to 1920, 1921. But what happened? There were all members of
what happened? You see, what happened is in dispute to today, right? There was a truce called, right? And then they went over to negotiate terms of a treaty. Now, De Valera went to the first meeting of the first negotiations on the treaty. And let's be straight about it. He didn't like what he saw. So he backed out of it and he sent Collins instead. Now, if De Valera and Collins had stayed together, the parallel is Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness, whether people like it or not. There is a modern parallel to what happened in 1921-22.
Yeah, but there's a difference there, Tom. I mean, the pressure that was put on Collins, you know, the threat of military retaliation and everything. I mean, I know he said he signed his own death warrant. He knew he was signing it. But I mean, I don't think it's the same comparison as with Adams. And even if De Valera was there, they'd come under severe pressure anyway.
Tom, I do believe that Collins and De Valera went together.
Yeah, I think
stood together and kept certain people in the loop.
Should have been with him, yeah.
Now, if the attitude was, look, this is the best we can do at this point in time, you know, and which it was, right? I don't think there would have been a civil war. It's the fact that De Valera, the strongest personality, stayed out of it, and then he was able to throw rocks afterwards.
Oh yeah, but like I was saying, if the two of them went over, I don't think they would have been able to resist the British because the pressure that was brought on them. But still, there wouldn't be as much opposition because De Valera and Collins would be together then.
That's my point. That they would have been able. They were under pressure from the British end.
I mean, the anti-treaty faction would be more rudderless or leaderless in the sense that they wouldn't be as influential as having De Valera and Collins on opposite sides. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
no, I don't dispute there was going to be people against it. There were some people in Ireland, if they came back with the 32-county Green Republic, some people would find fault with it.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, but I do think that if the two of them went together and stayed together, like as I say, like at Lumpet, Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness.
But the British were never going to, after the 1912 opposition to the Home Rule, the British were never going to agree to a 32-county republic.
It wasn't even a negotiation.
Yeah.
They had the Government of Ireland Act of 1920 had already elected, appointed a parliament in the 6 counties.
Yeah.
So for anyone to what's called that we were negotiating for a 32-county republic, it's a bit, disingenuous.
But I was brought up to believe that we were fighting for it. I did believe that we were fighting for a 32-county republic.
Well, unfortunately, whoever informed you incorrectly.
But you weren't informed, you just presumed to think that. Because I know going to school that and I'm sure that a lot of people would agree with me, going to school, if you got a teacher who was from one side, a teacher told you that De Valera was the greatest man that ever lived, right?
He was, yeah.
Year, you went into another class and you got a teacher who came from the other side and he told you that Michael Collins was the greatest man that ever lived and that De Valera got him shot. So who do you agree with and who's right and who's wrong?
But I think that was the rhetoric of the Republican side, was that 32 county or nothing. I mean, as Tom says, it wasn't on the agenda at the treaty, but once they got entrenched, they said, look, we're not taking anything except the 30, and even Sinn Féin today have the same rhetoric, you know, even from the Civil War, that the 32 county republic or nothing, you know. So like that was there, like, you know, and but I can see what Tom is saying. If the two of them went across, you'd have less. There might have been factions, but it wouldn't have been as bloody and as.
Well, if the attitude was, this is the best we can do at this point in time, and leave the future open.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know.
Most people would have gone with it.
I don't think I'd agree with that now.
But you want to agree with anything.
Yeah, but you can't agree with them, could you? You couldn't agree with the British after what they'd done in 1916. Could you agree with them?
Yeah.
But you're not, it's not the British you're suiting. You're suiting yourself.
Yeah, but see, I can see what Tony is saying there, Tom, is like he'd be seen as a sellout to the people who died for, you know.
Yeah, in 1916.
In 1916, yeah. You know, I mean. Well,
yes, but you see, there's another thing we say. You take things steps at a time. Like, what people forget is one thing. The treaty and the truce. Now I know it's flawed, yes, and there are a lot of shortcomings in it. But one thing it was doing, it was getting British soldiers and police out of Ireland for the first time in 800 years.
Yeah,
it was doing that.
I don't know. We'll go back to talking about the Civil War again. There's so many things that are going through my mind to ask you. I went down last year with you down. Funny the way you just think it's this year, but now it's 1919 we're talking about. We went down to the commemoration down with the Liam Lynch Memorial at the Round Tower below, which was a fabulous idea at that Round Tower. God, it's lovely to see. And down below the Knockwell Downs. Who was Liam Lynch? Where did he come out of then?
Liam Lynch was from Anglesborough in County Limerick, Barnagoraha, right? And he probably led the most active and the most successful unit in the War of Independence, the North Cork Brigade. Tom Barry's flying column might be more successful, but certainly Lynch was an extremely able guerrilla leader. Now, he was also, Lynch is never given credit for it. Lynch foresaw the Civil War, and he tried might and main to avoid the Civil War. He tried so hard to avoid the Civil War that, in my belief, he actually lost the opportunity to win it by trying so hard to avoid it. Now, by the time the Civil War broke out, the Free State Army was much better organised than it would have been if the war had broken out 3 or 6 months previously, which it could have. The Free State Army would have been in a relatively poor shape. But in time...
Tom, explain that about the 3 months, like we're talking about the treaty there.
Yeah.
Like the Civil War threatened to break out in Limerick in March 1922. There was all sorts of factions striving for control of Limerick. Now, Liam Lynch and Donegal Hannigan, Michael Brennan, patched up an agreement in Limerick. Now, just to explain, Donegal Hannigan from Anglesborough, from the same parish as Lynch, was the leading IRA man in Limerick. And he went pro-treaty. Michael Brennan from East Clare was also pro-treaty. Now, Lynch was anti-treaty, and they patched up an agreement in Limerick in March 1921. Now, I do believe if the Civil War had kicked off at that stage, that the anti-treaty forces would have been much stronger. And I would believe that they would have won. Now, what they would have done after beating the pro-treaty forces remains to be seen. But Lynch, as I say, tried very hard to avoid the Civil War. And when eventually he was effectively forced into it by the actions of others, his attitude towards the end was, well, ye started it now, lads, we're going all the way. Tom Barry, who was, say, very strongly anti-treaty. It seems at the end that Barry was trying to, dare I say it, make an accommodation with the pro-treaty people. And Lynch found out about it, and he went to physically beat Barry, because his attitude was, Barry, you provoked it. Now, it wasn't just Barry, but you provoked it. Now you've got to live with the consequences. And in fairness, Lynch, he's looked upon as a diehard, but I have great respect for him, because I think he was very honourable. He was very, he didn't want to stop the Civil War, but when it was started, he was going to go all the way.
But I don't like this. What if you have these problems? What if this happened for him? But I think if the Republicans won the Civil War, we say, or
what would happen then?
Well, the British would have to come back in, wouldn't they?
No, I don't think so. You see, British, let's be straight, they won't admit it, but they didn't. They were in decline. I think they were in decline. That they wanted an excuse to get out.
But you see,
come back in.
Well, where were they going? Like if supposing the Republicans won the Civil War, we say had they won it, like how are they going to do? How were they going to force a 32-country republic? I mean,
well, I would imagine they would have attacked the RUC and the British force in the north.
But so then you're bringing the British back into the whole thing.
You may. It's all speculation now. It never happened. But
to misquote Jack Lynch, I couldn't see the British standing idly by. But anyway, go back to we went to Sean Hogan there. He went on the run.
There's so many things said about Sean Hogan now. You're confused,
Yeah.
And,
there's a very good book on Sean Hogan. And
yes, by John Connors.
Yeah.
And
there's very few now, and John Flannery has written some good stuff as well.
Yes.
Yeah, John Mina.
There's some very good historians in Tipperary. Sean Hogan. There's actually a Sean Hogan who's written a couple of books. Des Moran in Tipperary Town. They've written some brilliant stuff.
Yeah, they have. There's a few out there I wouldn't trust. I wouldn't have them in my way. So
who wouldn't you trust? Tell us.
I had a good few. I've come across over the years now, and I tell you, I'd be bluffing their way. I'd bluff for myself, but it'd be better than me.
By omitting their names to predict the guilty, I mean, if you don't say it,
Talking about Sean Hogan, for example, explain what happened. This thing about there was a man rang me one night on the radio, and he said he had a cleaver that cut off the handcuffs of Sean Hogan. But I think he had a few drinks in him the same night, But what happened with Sean Hogan? He was arrested.
Sean Hogan was a 17-year-old, right, with fondness for the female sex. He's very fond of girls.
Yeah.
Now, and some of them were fond of him too. But anyhow, he was at
only some of them.
He was at a house dance in a place called Balloch, right? And after the dance, he was supposed to go back to O'Keefe's of Balloch. But he discovered that the girl...
Where's that? Where's Balloch? Where?
Near Clonouty.
Oh, near Clonouty, yeah.
Dundrum, Clonouty, that.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a few Bellocks. There's Balloch and Abbeyfeale. There's a few Bellocks,
Yeah, but this is Balloch and Clare, you say. All near Clonouty, right? Now, but he discovered that the girl he was, shall we say, keen on that night, she was, I think it was Bridget O'Keefe, that she was actually going to her cousins, the Mahers of Anfield. So the Balshawn decided he'd go with them. And on the way to Anfield, they passed a policeman's house a policeman by the name of John Cotter. Now, Cotter was what you would call a nosy peeler, right? When he saw, he didn't recognise Hogan, obviously, but he knew that he was in company of Bridget O'Keefe and a Bridget Maher. Now, Cotter knew that anyone in the company of the Mahers was suspect. So when he went back to his barracks, he reported what he had seen to the Sergeant Peter Wallace, and they decided to raid Mahers of Enfield. Now, when the policemen were coming towards Mahers, the Mahers saw them from a long way off. And one of the girls ran into the house and she said to Hogan, "Sean, the police are coming. You need to get out." Now, instead of saying, "Where are they?" he rushed out headlessly. The other said, ran down a field. The field is, you can still see it today, the field is over the level of the road, well above the road. So the policemen literally were waiting for him when he jumped out over the fence into their arms. And it went from that. Now, as I say, Hogan was supposed to go back to Mahers or to O'Keefe's of Glenark, but not for the first time. He had kicked over the traces. He was a bit indisciplined. Now, in fairness, he's only 17 years of age. He's short of his 18th birthday. He actually celebrated his 18th birthday inside the police cell in Thurles RIC station. He was then being taken to Cork. They knew that he'd be taken to Cork to be court-martialed, cost me a revolver, right? And the Tracy, Breen, Robinson, and a number of men from Galway rescued him off the train at Knockdown. But in the course of the rescue, two of the police escort, Sergeant Wallace and Constable Michael Enright, who was actually from Knockay, right? They were killed. And eventually, the police rounded up a number of men and charged them with the killing of the two policemen. And two men, Patrick Maher and Edmund Foley, were hanged. They were the last hanged in June 1921. Now, the thing about it was Maher had nothing to do with the rescue, except that a policeman by the name of Ring swore perjured evidence against him.
So when Sean Hogan was rescued, what happened then to him?
Sorry? They were taken back to West Limerick. Like in the course of the rescue, Breen was badly wounded. Tracy was less seriously wounded. He was fairly seriously wounded, but not as seriously as Breen. And the two of them, along with Robinson and Hogan, were taken back to Keynes of Ahawilk. Now, do you know Seamus O'Sullivan? You do?
Yeah.
Bradford, yeah.
Yeah. Now, they'd be cousins of Seamus's. They're in Ahawilk near Fiona.
Yeah.
The family are still there, I think.
Seamus's mother was keen.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seamus's mother was keen, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, how did Sean? Well, first of all, I should ask you, what age did he die? Sean Hogan. How did he die?
He died in 1969, December 1969. December 1968.
Yeah.
Right? He wouldn't be 70, you know.
Yeah.
Now, he had a kind of a checkered career.
Yeah.
As I say, I suppose in fairness to fellas like that, to live under such pressure and tension, settling back into normal life is not easy. And his marriage broke up, right? And his wife now, she was a lovely lady, and she was a lady, a very good-looking lady, and a lady in every sense of the word. And when he was dying, she went into the hospital. Now, she had every reason for doing otherwise, because he had left her high and dry. But she went into the hospital and she held his hand and she said, "Sean, I'm here for you."
Where is he buried?
He's buried in Tipperary, in St. Michael's.
Oh, St. Michael's. Yeah. But then Breen went to join Fianna Fáil, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Why did he join Fianna Fáil? You agreed to the
Well, you
policies.
see,
obviously.
sorry?
You must have
No.
agreed to the policies, right?
No, I would have great time for Breen. A lot is said against Breen,
Yeah.
right? But the one thing that from research I've done with Breen, is anyone that stood by Breen when he was under pressure, he never forgot it for them afterwards. Like my granduncle was a chemist in Dublin, and Breen was wounded in the attack on Lord French at Ashtown. And he was taken to my granduncle's house afterwards. And, you know, he was treated and bandaged up and whatever the hell was there. And he was moved on eventually. Now, he always, you know, he was always amenable to the family after that. Now, some fellas, you can do him a favour, but as soon as the favour is done, it's forgotten.
Yeah.
In fairness to Breen, that wasn't the case.
Myself and Tom Donovan would agree with that. Let's just tell people there, I didn't forget, if anyone's watching this, first of all, I have with me Tom Donovan and Tom Toomey. And Tom, I have to praise you. You're the best I know as regards the War of Independence. And there's nobody come near you. And you have to get your book there. Can you read your book there? Can you?
I can't. I don't know where it is. I genuinely don't know what it is.
But how many pages in that book?
780.
You wouldn't exactly be reading this in the toilet now, reading it tonight, would you?
No, not
more. So, just to jump to that, I should say that I have Tom Donovan and Tom Toomey with me, and we're on Limerick Media TV. If you want to see any of these programs or tell people about them, if you just click on YouTube, Limerick Media, YouTube, or you'll find them. We'll put my name in and you'll find them anyway. And we're members from the Limerick Historical Society. And we're talking about, well, we're at the cover the fair bit from the Rising, as was known in 1916, but got up to 1922 now. And the questions that I'm just asking Tom, things that I wanted to know about, that have kind of names that are bandied about. And all these names, you never know what happened to them and who they were or where they came from. But if anybody wants to know anything about the War of Independence in Limerick, buy Tom Toomey's book. It's a huge tome. Just to keep back about 6 doors, Tom, wouldn't it? The size of it, you know. But there's how much is the book? It's a huge book.
It's €40.
It's well worth €40. You know, especially if you're interested in that period.
I'll tell you, Tony, a number of years ago, I was in Dublin and I was in Stokes Bookshop. It's there in the arcade, Wexford Street. And strangely enough, my wife was in the bookshop because I don't know why I normally head off to the bookshop myself. But I saw Tom Toomey's book up on the top shelf, and I took it down and I said, Rosalind, look at here, look at the book. And Stokes came over to me. He said, that's how a history book should be written. He said, that's the ultimate book on the War of Independence. So I said, really? Yeah. I said, yeah, I've read it. I said, he said, oh, have you read it? I said, you haven't read all of it. I said, I have. So that's, you know, but I thought it was a compliment. He didn't know that I knew Tom.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, there's been other attempts and there's been books put out I'll say this, and if I met the editors of the Encyclopedia of the War of Independence, I mean, like, it lacks Tom's contribution. That's all I'll say. You know, there was errors and omissions in that book, which I won't even go into tonight. But this goes back to what we spoke before. Like, local knowledge, you can't trump local knowledge. You know, and you can bring all the academics and all the professors you like into a room, but you have to bow your knee to local knowledge. You know, I mean,
one thing I'll give Garrod a tweak at some chemistry school. The local knowledge, you said, is the thing, you know. Local knowledge, you know. Anyway.
But going back to the War of Independence, I think the successful ambushes were due to local knowledge, knowing the lay of the land, which the Black and Tans and the RIC, who were never really from the same county, like the policemen didn't serve in their own county, so they lacked the local knowledge. But Tom, there was an ambush Clonmult, which wasn't a Drumkeen. Can you just tell us about that?
Basically, there was a flying column in East Cork, based around the Middleton area, and they were hiding out in a disused farmhouse near Clonmult, near Dungorney. Now, they stayed there. They were there for, I think, 6 weeks. It was madness.
Yeah.
Because, if you stay in one place, the news is going to filter through, innocently or otherwise. And sure enough, the British found out about it. And they raided. Now, it was so badly done. The leader of the flying column was a fellow called O'Hurley. And he was gone off, sussing out a location for an ambush. And he took the second in command with him. So there was no one really in charge. There was 20 fellas around the farmhouse, right? Now, they were pulling out that evening. They were going somewhere else. And there was no one on guard. They had no sentries posted.
Yeah.
So the British had them surrounded before they even knew it. Now, they were inside in a single-story thatched house with one door. So, I mean, it was a death trap. And, you see, the auxiliaries were involved. Now, we haven't explained about the auxiliaries. There's a lot said against the Black and Tans. But the auxiliaries were much worse. The auxiliaries were a smaller force, about 2,000 men. They were all ex-officers. Now, most of them were officers that came up from the ranks. So they were the toughest of the tough. And they were much more ruthless than the Black and Tans. Now, as I say, the auxiliaries, anyhow, forced the people to come out. And they had executed 12 of them before a British officer came on the scene and stopped the executions. Now, there's a lot said against the British military, but a lot of the British military were honourable men.
Yeah.
And in this case, there was 8 fellas. Well, 2 of them were executed afterwards. So there were 6 men that can thank this British officer, whoever he was, for halting the executions.
You see, I know it's not Limerick, but the reason I'm saying that, we all heard about Kilmichael because of the glorious victory, but the victories are all, we had Johnny Donegan singing Kilmichael, but you very rarely hear about the tragedies of which that was like, or the slaughter. It was murder, really,
You do hear one, the Lonely Woods of Upton.
Yeah.
That's based on another IRA operation that went wrong.
That's right. Yeah. That's one of the
very few now.
Yeah.
I think Sean Dunphy was sing that, wasn't it?
That's right, Sean Dunphy,
yeah. I think Sean Dunphy came from a Republican background.
Are we going to show bench here now, right?
That's your part there.
Tony
knows something about that.
I can see Tony's eyes light up there when you mentioned Sean Dunphy. And he had a brother in the RT orchestra, didn't he?
Tony.
We're not getting into that. Oh, God.
Tony.
Huh?
You didn't have someone in RT.
No, he's not.
No, Sean Dunphy.
Oh, Sean Dunphy.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Listen, this what I'd like to... Tom, we'll have to do a program soon like that. Some of these atrocities, like what's the one down in Chile, the big one, that's
Civil War.
Civil War. There's so many of those atrocities that happened, during the Civil War.
Tony, the one thing about the Civil War is, okay, the Free State did most of the atrocities, but the Republicans did as well. The less said about the Civil War in my book, the better, because all you're going to do is reopen old wounds.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
At least with the War of Independence, it's out there. Dare I say, we're all on the same side.
Yeah,
I think.
Oh, yeah, that is true. Yeah.
With a comment, but it's like even in the American Civil War, Spanish Civil War, no matter what Civil War, it's bitter. It's brother against brother. There's horrible stories of people using the war to take out people.
The American Civil War. Come here. The American Civil War is still being fought in the southern states. Where's Mr. Trump getting a huge amount of his support?
That's another program. I mean.
But there's so many aspects to the Irish Civil War that we were never told about going to school. Things I never learned. About, like as I said at the beginning, that's why I mixed up the 1916 with the War of Independence, with the Civil War. I really couldn't tell one from the other because I learned nothing about them going to school. Absolutely nothing. You know,
Well, I think the history stopped, after the famine. There was no, like, I mean, you had a few bits about Michael Dillon or not Michael Dillon, he was
Michael Davitt.
Michael Davitt and
very little. But
John,
you had nothing after that, and I was told nothing going to school like that. It was amazing, really. I
was luckier than you because I had a good primary teacher.
It depended on what Tom said about Bernstein. You were lucky if you got a good teacher that was interested. Yeah. But you got some of them that kind of couldn't care less,
Yeah.
And
they didn't, Tony, it wasn't much they couldn't care less. They didn't know.
No.
You see, they are products of their upbringing as well. They're coming out of Carysfort and they're coming out of St. Pat's and Drumcondra, right? And they're only taught what's on the curriculum. Now, when Tom is talking about Bernard Stack and I'm talking about Sean Dennis, I'm talking about men that looked out from where they were standing and took an interest in the country around them and the people and what happened.
Yeah.
But you're lucky, both of you, that you can name people. I couldn't name one teacher that I ever remember.
But see, like we were lucky, we had a teacher from the locality, from our area.
Yeah.
Like you're probably teachers in the county or County Clare.
No. I can think of one that was from Limerick. I can think of another one that was from Clonlara. I can think of another one that was from Limerick. And then there were Christian brothers interspersed as well, at different times. And the Christian brothers obviously weren't from the area either. Yeah. And they were more into religion than they were into history.
Well, they failed miserably with you anyway.
They didn't make a priest out of it anyhow, Tom.
No.
And I think I'm amongst friends, huh? Oh, God. Anyway, I think we're talking over an hour already at this stage. Is there anything else, Tom, that I should ask you, Tom Toomey, as regards what stands out in your mind, or who stands out in your mind in the War of Independence? Who would you kind of admire, or who,
Well, I would admire Michael Collins. I would admire Liam Lynch. I would admire Johnny Hannigan, Tomas Malone. Okay, they would do what they had to do, but they weren't gratuitously ruthless.
Yeah.
There were some fellas, like there was a fella called Martin Corrie, who was supposed to have Martin Corrie down in Cork.
Yeah.
Who was supposed to have killed 38 British spies and agents, right, and soldiers, except that when it was teased out, there wasn't that many missing. Now there were fellas, who in times of war, it's very easy to lose your head and lose your sense of balance. You really got to, to identify people who were in serious positions. And okay, if the situation arose, they would have the guts to do what had to be done. But they weren't ruthlessly, they weren't gratuitously ruthless. Like there was a case in Drumkeen. There was a fellow called Sean Stapleton from Ula, a massive big man, tough as nails, right? Now, there were 2 Black and Tans executed at the end of the ambush in Drumkeen. And Stapleton, brave man, tough man, but he refused to shoot a man in cold blood. Everyone is responsible for his own behaviour.
But Tom, I know to take a whole program, but my pet peeve is the amount of people that claim that their families were involved or their ancestors in the War of Independence, and even reading the Limerick Leader in the 1930s and 1940s, someone dies and they say, or they provided a home for the people on the run, or they were, and of course pension, like when there's money involved. Even to this day, you get people claiming money and for different, when I see people saying we want justice, that spells
money,
euros, money, yeah. And but the pensions, like when you see the pension records and the amount of people who claim to be involved, and then you go back, as you have done, go back and look at the facts.
What did they do?
Yeah.
Like to me, the War of Independence pensions are put in perspective by the treatment of May Maloney. Right?
Yeah.
May Maloney was largely responsible for the rescue of Sean Hogan at Knocklong.
Yeah.
Right? 3 men came to her door at 4 o'clock on a May morning. She's a single woman living alone. She brings them in, gives them breakfast, and helps them with their plans, right?
Mm-hmm.
She goes to Thurles to find out what the situation is about Hogan. When she comes back, she goes to Galway to get more help for them. And when May Maloney went looking for a pension in the 1930s, and Seamus Robinson was one of the key men in the War of Independence pensions, she was turned down 3 times. So when I see that,
I've said that we've discussed this before. Like, I've seen people who were very active and having to fight for their pension, and then people who did absolutely nothing getting pensions. It's just
But listen, when the question was asked in the Dáil in the 1950s, right, about IRA pensions being paid in County Limerick, right, the 2 men with the highest pensions were, surprise, members of a certain political party in the Dáil, right? Now, the most senior member of the IRA living in Limerick at the time would be Liam Ford, right? And Liam Ford, at the time of truce, was the brigade commandant Mid Limerick. He was the flying column commander in Mid Limerick. And these 2 boys have a bigger pension than him. They shall remain nameless. But
is there? If people want to look it up, it's on the pensions website.
The pensions website, they can look it up themselves.
Or they can ring you for a sky high fee and you reveal the name.
All shall be revealed. All shall be revealed for the property.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tom, can I thank you for coming on today, Tom Toomey, first of all.
Yeah.
And once you learn one thing from a talk, you're flying. It's only one thing you learned. It's something. I've learned a few things now. You straightened out a few things for me. To thank you for coming on.
Will they stay straightened out? Now, I want to ask you a question before you leave.
Yes.
I've heard a rumour that you're now working for the health board.
Cut.
You
have me baffled here now.
Mr. Donovan will explain to you.
Oh, well, understand. But he might never explain either.
It's a bit cryptic, as I said.
Oh, yeah, cryptic. Well, I can imagine.
It's off air.
Well, I can imagine. Anyway, Tom, to thank you for coming on.
You're welcome, Tom.
And to thank you, Tom Donovan, as well for tonight. Right. And again, I have to cut both of you off now. And I have problems every week in working this little mouse. I'm so used to my own little laptop where you just press the thing and it's all over. I can never study this thing.
President Donovan is gone anyhow.
And you'll go now next, and I'll get rid of you. No, I think you're...
No, Donovan's still there.
No, you're still there. Oh, I mean...